Okay, so I just kind of felt like making a bow today. There's really no rhyme or reason for it. I had this nice, relatively untwisted piece of Osage. It's 54 inches long, and the bow I want to make is a bend through the handle bow, because with this bow only being 54 inches long, it's going to need that extra bend, that extra give. A 54-inch long bent to the handle bow should be able to be bent self-backed, in other words no backing, 27 inches without a problem, if you do it right. I always like a little extra help, so I may back it with rawhide on top of that, as well as a special skin that I've acquired, and that will give it some extra bend, safe bend, in order to take it to the 28, 29 inches that I need it to go. Alright, I will follow along. I have mapped out on here the widest part of this bow is going to be through the handle riser area. That's going to be 1.25 inches. So this whole bow is going to be either 1.25 inches wide or less. What I've done here, you can see I found the middle part, and then I've gone on the sides so that this line here is 1.25 inches. And then I just followed the grain around. Okay, so here we are about 30 or so minutes later. I just used a draw knife and reduced that down to the dimensions I was looking for. Now, basically, as I was saying before the camera got full of memory, was that the widest point on this bow is 1.25 inches wide. It's going to only be more or less, except around a few knots, it's going to be that wide or less when this bow is done. But for now, I just took it out to 1.25 inches, and I tried to reduce the entire thing to 1.25 inches wide. I'll make the narrowing cuts later. And then, so that's what I did there. Those were those lines there. So this entire stick, for the most part, right now, is around 1.25 inches wide. There are some knots where I had to go in a, may have gotten a little wider, but for the most part, that was the goal. I also, since I just had the draw knife out, I started the taper. It's not even right now. Obviously, I want the thickest part of the bow around the handle area, or the riser area. There's not actually going to be a riser in this bow. It's just going to be bent through the handle. But the thickest area is going to be in the center, and then it's going to taper narrower and narrower as it goes toward the tip. But I just did a sort of, I know after doing enough bows that this entire bow for bending purposes is going to be less than 1/2 inch thick throughout the bow, except of course in maybe even in the handle area, for that matter, actually, now that I think about it, because it's so short. If this bow were 72 inches or a longer bow, then it would be a little thicker, but I'm pretty sure this thing's going to be pretty, relatively speaking, pretty narrow throughout the bow. So I feel pretty confident just taking the wood off right now. Anyway, the bow has a nice reflex to it, which is only going to help us in the creation of this thing. That's natural. I didn't do that at all. And that'll probably go away as I work it in, but hopefully it'll keep it as close to true as possible. Anyway, that's where we are, and I'll show you the next step when I get there. Mike from BoarriorBows. Here's where we are at with this Osage bend through the handle bow. Now, I'm in the process. I've got it down as much as I want to get it down before I start the tillering process. But what I've done is I'm doing something a little different this time. I'm going to be adding, this is a calf rawhide. It's very, very good rawhide, but it's really thin. And because most of the stress in the bend through the handle bow is right here in the middle of the bow, I wanted not to have two pieces abutting each other, and instead one continuous piece. I am then going to cover it up with some goat rawhide. Why? Because I could use the calf again, but this is really, I cut this a little too thin. So it's perfect. The width of this bow is nice and narrow, as is this goat rawhide. So I'm going to have a piece of rawhide in the middle for protection. Then I'm going to take this one out to the edges, and it's just, I'm doing it for two reasons really. One, like I said, keeping the stress down in the middle, but also because this is a very, very short bow, and I want that extra protection, and I don't have any sinew I want to use at the moment. So there you go. And I'll be securing it all with a piece of ace bandage, letting it cure. And obviously I'm using Titebond 2 as my wood glue. And I'll show you what it looks like when we get there. Okay, I got to wrap this up before the glue cures, so I will talk to you soon, guys. Alright, the calf rawhide is now on. And I got to say, I am super impressed with the way this stuff adhered to the bow. I mean, I may have a new favorite material here for bow backing. I mean, it's almost seamless. Talk about, like, no pun intended, but a second skin on the bow. It's really cool. I'm liking it so much I may not even put on the other rawhide. Yeah, it's going to be a little debate, but I'll let you know what I do. The process is going to be the same, but I have to think about it. But I'll come back and let you know what I did. Mike from BoarriorBows. Securing it so spin doesn't mess up my tiller look judgment, but we'll see. Alright, here we go. Pretty good. I like the limb on the left better. The limb on the right looks like the second half to me of the limb is stiff. Let me come show you. So to me, from about this knot here over, looks like it's not bending as well as I'd like it to. Ah! Let's try it again. It's also got more reflex in it, which could be a factor as well, but tiller is tiller. Alright, see how look at the right limb, from the knot to the tip. See how it's just leaning, it's not really bending? It's bending pretty well up to that point. I also think that limb is a little bit stiff. Now, as far as the left limb is concerned, I don't see much bend from here to here. And as this is a bend through the handle bow, the whole thing has to bend. Alright, so look at the first half of the left side limb. See how it's leaning, it's not bending. Not yet. Also, the tail end of that limb isn't bending much either. So all the bend is happening in about the middle third of that limb, and all of the bend is happening in the first third close to the riser of the right-sided limb. So all the bend, to me, I'm just going to go over it real quick here, is happening from about here to here in this limb, and all of the bend in this limb is happening from about here to about here. Let's bend it again, see if you guys can see that. See that? There's like no bend here and no bend up here. This one bends fine, or it's bending here, and it's not bending enough there. So, one more look and then we're going to call it take a break. And bend, 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 bend! No, okay. So, on the left limb, the part closest to the riser, or the center of the bow, there is no riser on this bow, I'm just calling it that, is not bending, and the part closest to the tip is not bending. In the right-sided limb, all of the bend is coming near what would be the center of the riser, but the second half of the limb, I'd say at least half of it, is not bending as much as I'd like either. So those are the two areas I'm going to work. So how do I do that? Well, I already saw one part of it. I said this was the right-sided, and most of the bend is not happening from this half to the tip. So I've marked it with just a marker, and this limb was also stronger, so I marked for an S to show that it is the stronger limb. So once I do this part, I'm going to do the whole limb evenly once it's all bending. But I want to get the bend right first before I do the whole limb. On the other side, I've got some marks to make, but that's how we do it. And I'm going to scrape that off with a hard paint scraper. All right? All right, let's shoot a few. Shoots pretty well. I don't think it's the fastest bow I ever made, but it's shoots pretty well. Let me see if I can readjust this real quick. There we go. All right, so pretty good bow. There's no hand shock at all, which is a good, well, if there's any, I can't really sense it, which is saying a lot for me. Now the bow is basically done, and I just have to seal it, dress it up, make it pretty. Very small bow, packs a lot of punch. We'll come back with more information about pounds per draw. I would get a guess it's about 45, 50 pounds, somewhere in there. And probably shooting between about 150 feet per second. Not the, like I say, not the fastest bow, but still respectable enough to do the damage. And if you're doing a build along with me, then this is, you know, more or less you got yourself a bow now. If you want to stick around and see how I finish it, stay tuned for part 2. Thanks guys. Mike from BoarriorBows.